That's your nice finished edge. And then you have your gussets here. Start of your book. Next one. I'm going to open this back up and do the same thing with that last page. So you can glue it either side as long as you glue them together in order to make the gusset. Okay, so this one, I'm going to glue it here. And then I'm going to make sure to stick this together without going over. The other way that you can do this to make sure it's aligned is to use your score pad. The other thing with the art glitter glue, it gives you a minute to actually work it. So if you're off that little bit, you can still move it around a little bit. So make sure you burnish really well. You want a really good stick because that is your binding. And then the last thing that you're going to do is, again, you're going to take that 1/2 inch on this end and you're going to glue it together so that you have a nice finished edge in the back. So put some glue on the inside of that 1/2 inch and then go ahead and stick it down. Burnish it down really well. Okay. And now, my friends, you have the folio. So the next thing you're going to do is think about decorating, and just remember that if you put a flap on the front and you want to use seam binding or a ribbon to tie it shut, that you want to make sure to cut a slit in the side of that flap so that you can put the ribbon through. So in my case, for this second book, I'm using some different paper that I had in my stash. This is some authentic paper that is football that you can also get from Country Craft Creations. And I am going to use this field on my front cover as the flap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this down. And I'm not going to end up with the whole field on my paper, but that's okay. On my book, but that's okay. So I'm going to take this, and then I am going to grab my scoreboard. Grab your scoreboard. Make sure to put a 1/2 inch score on it. Okay. Fold that over. Burnish really well because you're going to cut a slit out of that score mark. So let me get this little pad on here and I'll show you what I mean. So in my case, I am going to have this on my book, so that if you bend that over, this is going to get glued down here, flush with the edge. So when this gets glued down, this becomes my flap. Okay? That's what it's going to look like. So let me do that. I also want to use some ribbon. So the ribbon that I'm going to use is going to go right through here. So I'm going to grab mine. I'm going to grab my X-Acto knife. And I'm going to grab my metal ruler. I'm going to line this up on the score mark here. And I want to put my closure, the ribbon coming across maybe here so I can put some wording or some stickers or something like that. So I'm going to cut basically along here for about an inch. Okay, make a couple of passes. Then I have my slit, and I'm going to make it a little bit wider. See that? So here is the there's the slit. Now does that make sense? That's how my ribbon is going to go through. Close this up. I think I need a new blade on that. And now that allows my ribbon to go through. The other way that you can do that is by just taking your scissors and just cutting out a little tiny bit along that fold. Now, with this paper collection that I'm using, I'm going to use some vintage photo to go ahead and distress some of my edges. I think that that will look good with the brown background. I know we're getting some dirt on the field now. Okay. Now, back to our folio. That's the front cover. This is the front page. This is the first flap. Now I'm going to glue this flap down. Again with my art glitter glue, but I'm going to use the outside of that flap. Okay. Then I'm going to place this right at the edge. Not over the edge, but right up to that edge. Press it down really well. Open it up. Use my bone folder for burnishing. Make sure to burnish it down really well. You can really see that opening right there. That's where my ribbon is going to go through. So make sure I burnished it down really well. And then I use some of this seam binding that you can get from Tamara's store. And I want to wrap it around and just make sure there's a generous amount to be able to tie a bow. Here, this one bow. And I'm also going to use some of this green one. You can also get from Tamara's store. Okay. Now I have my ribbons. Okay. Here's what I'm going to do. Get this out of the way. Okay, so the slit that you made in the side, now you're going to put your ribbons through. You're just going to feed them through that hole very easily. The thinner your ribbon is, the easier it is. That's why in this case the seam binding is pretty easy. Okay, and that's going to be your closure for the front. Now, for the flap to close, I did use one magnet. If you don't want to use a magnet, you don't have to cut a slit in the side. You can simply wrap the the ribbon around on the outside, and that would work. The only thing is that you would have to start here, since this is where your flap is, and wrap around the other way so that you could open it on this side. Okay, so I like the way that this looks. I am going to be putting my page on top of here, my next matting page. Let's see. Should I do the footballs? I think I might do the football on here. What's the other one that I have here? Authentic. Maybe to bring in the black, I'll use the X's and the O's. Yeah, I think I like that a bit better. Now, a lot of people measure their matting. And I'm going to tell you what I do. I use a pencil. So what I do is I lay my paper down. I give it that little bit of edging that I want, so that I can just use simply a pencil and mark my paper where I need to cut it. And mark my paper where I want to cut it. And then I'm just going to cut my paper. So let's see. Stick this in. Look for the pencil mark here. Put it in my trimmer. Trim the paper apart. Now, if you want a measurement for this, the folio is 8 inches tall. So if you want an 1/8 of an inch border, you would use a page that is 7 3/4 tall, and the book is 5.5 inches wide. So if you want, again, if you wanted an 1/8 of an inch border around it, then you would cut it down to 5 1/4 inches wide. That's basically what this is. I just don't bother to measure like that. Like I said, I use the pencil. So I'll be right. Let me do this real quick. And then I'm going to show you how I'm going to do the magnet and how I'm going to help my ribbon stay. In place. Okay. I'm going to use some score tape here. Magnets, 2 magnets. You can get these magnets also from Country Craft Creations. But I'm going to put one here. And the other one is going to go on my back of my flap. Sometimes this is the hardest part. Okay, the other thing I do is I use some of my score tape, and I will place it down with the sticky side so that these magnets go together.